It's preparing the live stream, they say. Assalamu alaikum and a pleasant good evening to all our viewers. In commemoration of the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women and the 16 days of activism during the period November 25th and December 10th, Madinah House, the National Muslim Women Organization of Trinidad and Tobago, and FISCAL will be hosting a 3-day online discussion on domestic violence. Domestic violence is everyone's business. It can affect the home, the family, and the community. Today's session will be moderated by Mr. Devon Rambali, psychologist and floor time practitioner, who would introduce our facilitators for today's discussion. I now hand over to Mr. Rambali.
Thank you, Wahida, and welcome to all our viewers and listeners. Further appreciation to Madinah House for taking the initiative to have a conversation concerning domestic violence and the ways in which it impacts our society. At this point, I would like to introduce our facilitators for this evening's discussion, and I would start with Mrs. Vandana Siusanka Ali, a clinical psychologist and consultant at her private practice and consultancy firm. She is also a child protection specialist with over 11 years of experience and a past lecturer of the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, as well as the University of Guyana. Mrs. Siusanka Ali's experience transcends borders with consultancy experiences with companies focused on international development and social justice, as well as country ambassador for the Global Peace Chain and as a past government delegate at the prestigious International Visitors Leadership Program. She is also an avid speaker and facilitator, imparting information to various audiences on a range of psychosocial topics, mental health, and parenting. Above all, Mrs. Siusanka Ali considers her role as a mother to her young son, her greatest achievement yet. Welcome, Vandana.
Thank you so much, Devin, and it's a pleasure to be here. I want to say thank you and welcome to all the viewers and listeners on this program, and to say thank you for being part of such an important discussion. When we understand more, we can do more. And so I invite you to be part of a very fruitful discussion and as we work towards change in this very important area.
Thank you. The other panelist present this evening is Mrs. Padma Bayam, a family and trauma therapist. She is also a counseling skills trainer with over a decade of successful experience in her field. She is currently a certified clinical trauma therapist with the Green Cross Academy of Traumatology and has facilitated and co-facilitated a number of trainings over the past years with the organization. In addition to her services rendered with the Green Cross, Mrs. Byam conducts her therapy service full-time. She works with families, youth, children's homes, and shelters for domestic violence and trafficking victims in Trinidad. Welcome, Ms. Byam.
Thank you, and thank you for having me on this program. I'm always excited. I want to welcome our viewers and listeners and really encourage you to tune in and really take in all the information. It is a passion of mine to bring information across that would help you to apply today. I've worked in domestic violence for quite a number of years, and I'm hoping that experience could come to you in a way that you can use. So welcome to the program. Thank you, Devin.
Sure. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah.
So, guys, I'd like to first start by, of course, presenting to both of you the general question that, of course, most persons are familiar with, domestic violence. And if you can commence by commenting on what exactly is domestic violence?
Okay, Devin, I'll take that one. And oftentimes when we hear about domestic violence, we think about it in the context of a couple. And in that sense, it's intimate partner violence. But domestic violence is really a broader spectrum than just the nature of the relationship between a man and a woman or partners. So domestic violence is really a pattern of abusive behavior in any relationship that is used by someone to gain or maintain power and control over another person in the relationship. And so we see that domestic violence can be done against a spouse, but it can also be done against the children in the home as well. So it is complex and multifaceted. There are many types of domestic violence. Sometimes we think of domestic violence purely in terms of physical violence and sexual violence, but there are other types as well, such as psychological or emotional abuse or domestic violence, financial abuse, and even digital abuse. And I know that we'll get into that discussion as we go on today.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Vandana. Michelle,
Yeah.
any comments on that?
Yeah, well, that was excellent, Banana. But I just wanted to put out, as we progress, we want to acknowledge that we know that the incidence of it and how we experience it, usually the abusive partner is deemed to be male. Yeah. So as we're going through and as we're talking, and when we refer to that abusive partner, the he, comes out sort of automatically. But we want to acknowledge as we begin, before we go on, we do acknowledge that men are abused as well. Now, as we practice, we culturally we know that men do not come out as openly as women do. So how we experience it in office, it means that the numbers tend in that direction, that the abusive partner may be male and of course the victim female. But we just want to put it out there. We know that the opposite is also true. But when we speak, as we continue to discuss, we just want to say, guys, we know that you all go through it too. And it is not a bias that is inherent, but as we talk. Yeah. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, guys. So I believe that it's common when we think of domestic violence, it being a matter that is centered and surrounds females. So Vandana and Michelle, I appreciate both of you commenting on the full spectrum of its occurrence, including children as well as males.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm sure I look forward to your conversation on those additional thoughts as we move forward. Um, so moving on, guys, I think we can perhaps comment and chat a bit on what are some of the different forms of domestic violence. I know many persons may interpret it or understand it to be the physical part of it, where the woman is a victim of physical abuse and so on. And I would like very much if we can get into a conversation about all of the different varieties as it presents today.
Mm-hmm.
So, Devin, as you mentioned, physical abuse being the most obvious. This is any physical act that is done in a relationship that is abusive in nature, again, and meant to maintain that power and control over the other partner. And so this involves things like hitting, slapping, shoving, grabbing, pinching, pulling hair, biting. All of these are types of physical abuse that someone may experience. But another sort of overlooked type of physical abuse also involves forcing substance use upon a partner. That's something that happens sometimes. And also not taking a partner for medical care. So you know that your partner requires medical care, but you refuse to allow them or to take them to receive that medical care, which is a form of medical neglect, and it really falls under the umbrella as well of physical abuse because you're denying the person the ability to maintain their physical well-being. So that's the obvious type of physical abuse, but there are even elements in there that are not so obvious.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Especially when the economic factors come in, because we experience a lot of that type of abuse sort of minimized and put into the bracket of we can't, because of financial restraints, but yet money is being spent in another direction. Yeah. So you find that the confusion that surrounds all the types is so prevalent that it takes someone a long time to actually decipher, what's going on, and is it abuse? Is it? And I think that's why we titled this segment accordingly. Is it abuse? So one of the key features of all the types is the confusion that comes with it and the length of time it takes for that victim or the person experiencing the abuse to figure out what is actually going on.
And I want to add something to that, in that oftentimes the first time or the first few times that a physical act or any of the other forms that we'll talk about today happens, uh, the abusive partner may say that it was a mistake, it really was not intended. And so that adds to the whole dynamic of confusion. And imagine the first time that you receive a physical blow, for example, and that's something that's very unusual in your relationship. It can come as a real shock, and tied into that feeling of shock is confusion. And
Yeah.
especially if the partner is extremely regretful and remorseful and says it's a mistake and it's never going to happen again. So that really adds to that picture of confusion. And as it happens more and more, you see that partners start to find it very difficult to comprehend how can this thing really be happening to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the major milestones is really that first time. There's one time count. Do we count that as abuse because it happened just one time? So there's that hesitation to define it as such. Yeah,
Yeah.
because nobody's clear as to whether one time counts as a defined abusive act. Yeah, so excellent.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, guys.
Mhm.
Just to add a bit and to ask a question that perhaps you can comment on. As I'm aware, there are precipitating sort of features and interactions that may occur before, let's say, physical abuse occurs. The common ones being physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. But as I'm aware, there are many different types of many different channels in which domestic violence occurs. Some being social, some being financial, and some being even digital. So if you can comment on what may be some of the precipitating factors and also some of the uncommon ways in which domestic violence occurs, such as social, financial, digital, and so on.
And so, Davin, as you mentioned, we started to talk about financial abuse, and where that comes in as part of denying the non-abusive partner certain rights that they have. And so financial abuse or economic abuse is controlling or restraining a person's ability to use their financial resources or to acquire their financial resources that they are entitled to. So you may find that the abusive partner prevents their spouse or their partner from having access to money. They may be coercing them and controlling the funds in the home, controlling the assets. They may find that sometimes the abusive partner, may unfairly use their partner's economic resources. So they may have access to the card or to the cash that belongs to the non-abusive partner, and they may use it out, or use it for the things that they want to use it for, but not for that they may not allow the non-abusive partner access to that. It also involves taking control of financial decisions that do not give room for the non-abusive partner to have a say in how their own money is used. So that's another element of the financial abuse, where the abusive partner really takes control and limits access to the non-abusive partner, to their own resources, their economic resources.
Great, great. Thank you. Michelle, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, you had in the question, it was I was trying to remember if you were asking about the signs like before, something about the run up to it, you were
Yeah,
suggesting.
so it was a bit of a two-part question.
Uh-huh.
One to comment on the different types of domestic violence outside of the common ones being physical, sexual, and emotional, and
Mm-hmm.
also if we can comment on what are some of the precipitating factors that lead, or what are some of the signs to look forward to that may be occurring before. Um,
Right. Yeah, that's what I thought I did. So, like, if we use the financial control and the decisions, right? Um, Many times, the beginning of this is that the the abusive partner, they actually have that as a strength. Yeah. So let's say they have good financial acumen, they are good with money, they save well, right? So in the beginning of this whole situation, the 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 non-abusive partner ties into that willingly. If you understand what I'm saying, it's like you acknowledge and submit to the fact that this person is better than I am at X, Y, and Z, dot, 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 right? So it means that when you go in, there is presumably an agreement, spoken or unspoken, that this person will take the lead in all these decisions. Yeah. So what happens is, as it happens that way, and then the relationship or the situation develops, you realize that the non-abusive partner is trying to get in. It's like, okay, I have an idea, I have, I can maybe handle the savings at home, and you can handle all the investments, and you can do this and I can do that. And that is when you realize that there is literally a boundary and a block on allowing that person to join in, and it become teamwork. Yeah. So the first sign for the non-abusive partner is when an attempt is made at entry into that system that they would have agreed to without knowing what they really agreed to. Yeah. So it means that sometimes if the sign comes within the arrangement already running, and you don't really get a chance to see it before, because sometimes when we talk about signs, we have that picture in our minds that before it happens, we have a chance to step back and look at it and say, okay, I saw this or I saw that. But sometimes what you see in the beginning, you agree to, but then when you get in, you realize, when I try to get in on the get in and share in that agreement, then I'm blocked. And that is when, we begin to see it moving towards an abusive situation, even with finances.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. So I'm picking up a lot, Michelle, from what you would have just shared. Some semblance of a pattern or a potential cycle that may begin emerging. I don't
Yeah.
know if you guys would want to comment on that.
Mm-hmm.
If
And
if a
time.
pattern exists,
Mm-hmm.
does, does a cycle exist? What does it look like? Is it self-perpetuating?
Yeah. And the timing too. The timing is really what I want to bring up, because I think what catches us off guard is that impression that you have all this time before to look and see and read and make a quality decision to say, well, okay, that's not for me. And really, as it happens, it doesn't really unfold like that in many cases. Yeah. And that's why I brought out that example, because it's only when, and then it's only when you attempt to do something that was um, additional to that initial agreement that you realize that there's really a boundary placed on you and you didn't even know that. Yeah. So there is a pattern. Sometimes you see it from within, and then what do you do because you're already inside? You know. So yes, there's a cycle. Yes, there's a pattern. But I think what we as a public need to realize is that the impression we have, so we hear somebody is in this situation, the impression we have that they had all this pre uh, this pre-knowledge and time beforehand to really see and make that decision, and that really is not the case. So sometimes it's not fair to the unfolding of the situation, the way it is viewed from the outside. Yeah, but once inside, yes, there's timing, there's pattern, there's cycle. Vandana, anything?
Yeah. And I think what Michelle is describing is sort of that first stage of the cycle, which is a tension building stage. But
Mm-hmm.
it's subtle. And so this is during that time when the abusive partner may start to display certain subtle signs of abuse and behaviors that gently increase in intensity and frequency.
Yeah.
And so you might find that it may be related to certain stressors that the person is going through or the family may be going through. Maybe there are financial difficulties, maybe there's problems at work, maybe there, interpersonal challenges that are happening, health challenges. And so it's very easy to link some of what we begin to see to the things that are happening at that time. But increasingly, these tense behaviors can look like things like irritability, impatience, short temper, and those things don't strike you as the type of things that are going to necessarily lead to an abusive incident,
Correct.
especially in the context of a stressful life situation or environment. But then eventually those grow to emotional outbursts. And the you may find that there are attempts by the abusive partner to exert increasing amounts of control, and the non-abusive partner starts to realize, as Michelle says, only when you're kind of in it, that you're walking on eggshells. Like there's something that just does not seem right. You start to feel this sense of unease in terms of being able to function normally. You're not sure what's going to trip off, your partner. So you're being quite careful as well. And these are sometimes some of the telltale signs, but they're very subtle and they can happen over a lengthy period of time, and naturally, as you could see, if it's small things like irritability and impatience, those can easily be justified, explained away,
Yeah.
until it hits the second stage, which is the abusive incident. And so
Mm-hmm.
at some point in time, the tension has built enough and it will culminate in one of the abusive incidents. And as we talked about, it can look like physical abuse. It could begin to look like financial abuse. There's sexual abuse as well, and this is really where a partner forces or coerces the other partner to engage in sexual contact with them without consent. And the issue of consent is really important because in the context of this discussion, many times this comes up as if you are particularly in a marriage or in a committed relationship, uh,
Mm-hmm.
does marital rape count as sexual abuse? And the answer is yes, it does. If there was no consent and one of the partners has said no, then no means no. And any act that seeks to force or coerce someone else to engage in an act like that is a form of abuse. So, sexual abuse is one type. It can look like marital rape. It can look like forcing the partner to have sex after a violent act, or even treating the partner in a sexually demeaning way. So there may be certain things that someone may be uncomfortable with, and there's a certain level of force that happens to engage that person in those types of acts. So the sexual abuse is one type of incident. We talked about economic abuse. An emotionally or psychologically abusive act is another aspect of the incident, that second stage, that abusive incident. And this is the really damaging part because this is the one that undermines the the self-esteem and the self-worth of the non-abusive partner. So this is where the abusive partner may constantly criticize, the spouse or the partner, call them names,
Mm-hmm.
humiliate them, diminish their abilities. This perhaps you're doing certain things in the home, or with the children, and those things are criticized, and you're made to feel that they're not good enough. It might involve, harsh criticism, intimidation, threatening to harm oneself. And so this is something that we hear a lot from abusive partners, where they may say, if you don't do so and so, I will do this to myself, and they may threaten to kill themselves, or they may threaten to hurt themselves, or they may do so in regard to the children. So making threats about how they may hurt their children, or what they may do to take away the children, all of those things can connote psychological abuse. They may also threaten your family and friends, isolate you from family or friends, school, work, all of these environments. So this really tends to undermine the identity and sense of self-esteem of the non-abusive partner. And Devin, you mentioned technological and digital abuse. And in this digital world, this is another form that we have to consider as falling under the umbrella of the abusive incident. So when we a lot of us are, attached to our social media accounts, our devices,
Mm-hmm.
and digital abuse involves a pattern of behavior that is really intended to harm or threaten or control another person in a way that uses technology.
Yeah.
So you may find that a person an abusive partner may limit their partner's access or restrict them from using social media or to have a phone, for example. They may also threaten to release intimate videos and photos as a form of intimidation and harassment. They may use tracking devices, within your phone or other devices that you may use, all in an attempt to maintain power and control. So these are some of the other forms of abuse that really culminates in that incident. And that is the thing that, when that happens, it really causes the shock factor, that all of this tension that was building has finally, culminated in this act. And it's something that's really very challenging to come to terms with, for the non-abusive partner who perhaps was not expecting this from their partner all along.
Mm. And then after the event, yeah, it's we have to make up for this. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, we have to make up for this. But is it really making up? Or is it really
Mhm.
an attempt to bring you back aligned? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that honeymoon period that follows the event is really significant, and it really does um, work in terms of clouding the non-abusive partner's perception of what just happened. The emoji is like, what just happened? We don't know because,
Michelle,
yeah, go ahead. Yes,
thank,
David.
thank you for going in that direction. What I would like to ask is if you can comment on what exactly does this look like?
What does the honeymoon?
That exactly, that honeymoon stage. So, what does
Yeah,
it look like after the incident? I know
yeah,
we're using a lot of jargon and so on, guys, and I would like
yeah,
that with real-time possible examples to help the audience better connect with to what it is we're saying and really picture in their mind what this thing looks like in real time.
yeah, yeah. I think the honeymoon looks like what we want to see um, of the person that hurt us, which is remorse. It starts off with whether real or feigned remorse, humility, um, a lot of words, narrative that points to value, yeah, which we want to feel. There's giving. There is a lot of intimacy, meaning not necessarily pursuing sex, but there's a lot of closeness, all of which the non abusive partner wants, always wanted, and really values. So now you have side by side demonstration of this lash out event or whatever mode that the abusive partner used, and it hit home, it hurt. But now we have a scale balancing that event with all this remorse and humility and kindness and gifts, because all of a sudden they remember the flavor chocolate that you've liked, right? That they could never remember for years, right? So all of a sudden they remember that you like salted caramel chocolate, and it's so hard to find, and they finally found it, right? So now what you're presented with is the scale that you're trying to balance the abusive event, and then there's all of this. So now you are wrestling to determine and say, well, if this is how he can be, you see, that's what I mean. He came out, right? If this is how the abusive partner can be, then let me hold on for more of this.
Yeah.
Let
Great,
me
great.
let me do fall in line for more of that.
Yeah.
And then you become uh, a servicing factor. So you try to do all you can to keep that side of the scale with the chocolates and the flowers and the kindness and the intimacy that doesn't push for sex. And that is such a key feature. I don't know, Vandana, if you've experienced that as well. Um,
Definitely.
yeah, prior to the abusive event, there's touch, sex is assumed to follow, right? But after the abusive event, in that honeymoon period, all of a sudden, we have an understanding that intimacy is not always about sex. And it's like, whoa, I want more of that. So then
Yeah.
you begin to work towards doing all you can to get more of that,
Yeah.
and unknowingly you're falling into that cycle and that pattern where you are
Yeah.
now
And I,
looking forward to that partner in that version, but that version comes after the abusive event, but
yeah.
that person is not aware of that. Vandana, you wanted to say?
Yeah, I was saying that the reconciliation phase, which is what we're talking about, is the one that really plays games with the minds.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as Michelle is saying, this is suddenly there's an influx of romance and support and love, and the person may apologize and they may make promises of never doing it again, shower you with all the affection. And as she said, this is what the a non-abusive partner has been craving for so long. So
Yeah.
now that you're getting it, and especially coupled with perhaps the abusive partners seeming genuinely ashamed of their behavior and really committing and promising that they're not going to do it, they're going to reform. That's not going to happen again. This is where the non-abusive partner starts to feel inclined to believe what they're saying, and then they even may start to question their own interpretations of what happened. To say, okay, well, maybe it really wasn't, as bad as I thought it was. Maybe he really didn't mean to do that, or she didn't mean to do that,
Yeah.
and then they'll give them another chance. And
Correct.
that ultimately leads to the next stage over time, which is that calm stage. And during the calm stage is where we find that some of these attentive and supportive behaviors continue, but there's a slight shift that's starting to happen in that the person is moving from being apologetic to now starting to excuse their actions. So they may acknowledge something happened, but start to shift responsibility. I'm sorry, but sorry for what happened, but it's because of so and so,
Mhm.
or they may, if this didn't happen, XYZ didn't happen, I wouldn't get so angry. I wouldn't lose it, or there may be some gaslighting happening at this stage where the abusive partner starts to say, well, it really wasn't that big of a deal, gosh, everybody does lose their marbles a little bit every now and then, and sometimes this is where you hear, you shouldn't have, if you didn't do that, I wouldn't get vexed, and we could try and do it this way, So this stage starts to add to the confusion, where it seems like your partner wants to make amends, they want to make things right, But there's just something underlying there that just seems like it's not as loving and supportive as the stage we were just in. Something is shifting, something is feeling a little bit dismissive, and you just can't put your finger on it. And then after a while, the tension starts to build again. And so that's the cycle that starts all over again.
Mm-hmm. And another feature of that calm, the after the is an expectation of future forgiveness. So now in the first round, remember you, the non-abusive partner is there thinking, okay, I'm giving grace, I'm giving a chance. It was the first time, it was this and that, but unknowingly as well, you've just committed yourself to an unspoken agreement for forgiveness. So that cycle goes the same way the next time. And then the next time, if that forgiveness is not given, it's like, okay, what is different? How come I was forgiven the last time and I can't get forgiveness this time? I'm no different. Nothing happened differently. Why not forgiveness this time? And it's demanded. So, and this is another point of entrapment in the sense that you go round thinking, okay, you've given grace to give space to do better, but it's really one of those unspoken agreements again that you're not aware that you're committing to and that you're signing. So many times when you try to say, okay, yes, the honeymoon period is so good and so much is offered, can you hold out and maintain on that first time that we need intervention or something needs to be done, right? Because unknowingly, what you're doing is you close the loop, and the next time that forgiveness is demanded, and then you become the non-abusive partner becomes the fault because you did this, you did that, you rest the glass down on the left, it should be on the right, you close the door too hard, work hard for me, this. And also, you're unforgiven because all this happened. I'm going through all of this. You forgave me the first time. What happened this time? Something has changed. So that non-abusive partner has to explain to the abusive partner, how come you can't forgive me this time? What has changed? Somebody else on the scene? Somebody talking to you? Where is that forgiveness? And it's a demand. And that feel changes because there's some toxic you're feeling sort of on the underneath. Yeah. And this is another point that first time is so important. That first loop, Vandana, is so important. But there's not enough information and awareness yet for you to manage that loop so that you leave windows for intervention. It's tough. It's a tough
Many,
situation.
it really is. And many persons who've been through this experience will talk about how quietly insidious that first loop is. Because there's
Yeah.
the shock factor, there's the confusion, there's the I can't believe this happened, what is really happening here, and
Yeah.
so it happens very quietly, and oftentimes people think, and they often point fingers and say, well, one time is enough, so why did you stay for it to happen another
Yeah.
time? And
Yeah.
yes, one time is enough to recognize that this is likely to be a pattern, and you should not be allowed to face things like that. But the psychological factors that really are at play during that first loop, it really does mess with the mind, and
Yeah.
it's easy, particularly if for a period of time the non-abusive partner has been made to feel less than, and to feel that they are not worthy and that they don't have a voice. So that lack of self-esteem and that, lower levels of resilience really allow the abuse to continue. And here we start the second loop, you know?
The second.
And as we
Yeah.
talk about low self-esteem, I know that's one of the really big ones when Devin asked the question earlier about, some of the predictive factors or some of the precipitating factors.
Yeah.
Uh, you
Mm-hmm.
know, Devin, was that sort of where you were thinking about what were some of
Yeah,
those?
yeah, just to
Yeah,
make mention of that, and what I hope we can get into at this stage of the conversation is, are there predictive factors to becoming a victim?
yeah,
What does it look like? Am I at risk by just being myself? And what are some of the things I may possibly need to look out for? I know some things may have been mentioned. Vanana, you spoke about irritability and stuff like that, and the those sorts of um, many shifts that occur before that sometimes occur before an incident. But if we can
Mm-hmm.
just review that, those precipitating factors, the predictors of just in case persons are wondering, hey, I know what I am. Am I likely to be a victim of domestic violence? And if so, what are some of the things that I perhaps should be looking out for?
yeah. So we started the discussion with, mentioning low self-esteem. And so that's one of the
Mm-hmm.
risk factors, having a low sense of self-worth, not believing that you're good enough, thinking that perhaps you are undeserving of, good things. And these ideas sometimes exist at an unconscious level, and they've been formed over time because of experiences. So someone may not even be very aware that these are some of the core beliefs that they have that are driving, their actions. But low self-esteem is one that we see a lot. I'd say we've seen non-abusive partners who had a history of abuse. So, for example, if in childhood, for example, or maybe in another relationship before, they've been a victim of other forms of abuse, it sort of sets the trajectory for that vulnerability, and the low self-esteem, the belief that bad things happen. So that's of a risk factor that we see. Oftentimes persons who have been through this experience have had some other adverse life experience before in the context of a family setting or even in another relationship, if they've been in unhealthy family relationships. So perhaps even growing up in a home where there was also domestic violence and seeing, how the non-abusive partner in their family of origin was treated. There may be you asked Devin about the victim, and so sometimes learning roles from our family, seeing how sometimes maybe your mother or your father, was very subservient, and took a very, diminishing role within the family. One learns that, that, okay, this is what it means to be a wife or a mother, or even, a father or a husband who isn't given significance in the home. So those are some of those factors that really contribute to, perhaps being emotionally vulnerable, having that sense of emotional dependence that then puts you in a place where you attach that value to the abusive partner. And then you're at the mercy of the hands of the perpetrator or the abusive partner. Michelle, you have any
Yeah.
others that you've
And
seen
one,
or experienced?
yeah, just to add to the family role point, that martyr role, man, that is so invasive. Yeah, because by definition, the martyr is to receive suffering and wear it well. And there have been cases where, and that comes from your family environment straight over. Yeah. So I have heard in that abusive dynamic, both the non-abusive partner in that martyr role and the abusive partner honoring and lauding the martyr in that very dynamic. So the martyr is like, okay, taken the abuse, taken and the abusive partner is saying, no matter how much I hit, chase, uh, embarrass. She not, again, the she comes out. He or she is not leaving. And that becomes one of the points of pride of the relationship, you know? So that matter role is so, it's like preparation for an abusive relationship because it's admired by the martyr themselves. Suffering defines me and how I wear it well. And it's also admired by the abuser, saying, no matter how much suffering, look how good she looking. She, he or she, and they're not leaving, right? So that family role is so important to examine, and it really does set you up, so to speak, for an abusive relationship. Yeah.
Thanks,
Other
guys.
Vandana, you wanted to go? Yeah. One of the other things I wanted to bring out too as a risk factor is really um, the inability to regulate emotions, dysregulation, right? Emotional dysregulation. Um, and the two emotions in particular that that person is unable to regulate are anger and shame. Shame is so debilitating and it leads to such toxic behavior. So when that abusive partner is unable to regulate, especially these two, anger and shame, it really is a big risk factor, um, leading to and pointing to either being the abuser or the victim. But that part is overlooked a lot when we list the risk factors or the predictive factors. Very rarely we hear about just that person being unable to regulate emotions, and in particular anger and shame. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Thanks, Michelle. I don't know. So what I'm getting, guys,
Mhm.
it's and correct me, of course. Um, Something that we can that I'd like to share with the audience is perhaps um, preventative factor possibly being, hey guys, everyone should start looking inward. Who am I? What am I as a person? What led me to this point in my life where I am right now? All of my past experiences, what are my family dynamics? What did I experience as a child? What did I see as a child? What was my first relationship like? What were the relationships that followed? Um, that led me to this point in this relationship, in the here and now where I am. Um, to create a sort of an awareness of, do I have a disposition to become a victim based on all of the things that occurred in the past? And like you just finally said, Michelle, an awareness of what exactly am I feeling? How does shame impact me? How does anger impact me? Not just that, have I been paying attention to what the potential abuser, how they may be impacted by feelings of shame and anger in the smallest sense, um, to the largest of senses? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
guess a suggestion for persons to consider looking inward and really doing some introspecting on what they are, where they came from, um, and build that self-awareness as a protective mechanism for the future. So,
Mm-hmm.
guys, what I would like to, in the essence of time, what I would like to ask finally is, what are some of the things people can do to mitigate the effects of domestic violence? So we spoke previously about the risk factors. What are some of the protective factors that can be utilized?
Yeah. So, Devin, you see how you mentioned they're doing some personal work, that's one of the protective factors. Self-awareness is important, and acknowledging, if there are areas of your life that you feel make you more vulnerable, finding avenues for seeking support and getting help. And we're saying all of this making an assumption that the non-abusive partners have the capacity and the emotional intelligence and the wherewithal to even do some of this introspection. And
Correct.
sometimes that's not even possible because of, where they've come from and the experiences that they've been through. But knowing that is important as well, so that you can seek help if, you recognize that there is something that puts you at risk. Another key protective factor is social support. And next
Mm,
week, when we talk about the experience of the victim or the survivor, we will talk about how very critical how the role of social support is and how much of a double-edged sword that is. Because persons who have
mm,
social support, they have a circle of family or friends or colleagues that they can turn to in time of help. They are the ones who will better survive an experience of domestic violence rather than someone who is isolated and has no support, nobody that they can turn to for protection and help. I also want to mention that education
yeah.
has been noted to be one of the greatest protective factors as
Mm,
well. And this is not to say that educated persons aren't also victims of domestic violence. They are. But generally, the statistics and the
mm,
trends show that persons of lower educational attainment can be more likely to be victims because of some of the other social factors that might be at play. So they may not have the financial resources, they may not have access to employment, so may be very dependent on the partner, which leaves room for them to be exploited. They may be in a position where they have poor social support as well. So it's really important, I think, as we raise children as well, to raise children who have healthy
mm,
self-esteem, to raise children in a healthy family environment,
yeah.
give them appropriate role models that they can see and look up to, and see themselves adopting similar rules like that, to raise children in an environment where they access
Mm,
optimal education, that they know that they have a voice, recognition that there are persons that they can turn to for support. All of these act as protective factors that as a child is developing and growing, it becomes part of who they are. And so they grow up into an individual who is more resilient and less likely to be vulnerable to a situation of domestic violence.
Great. Thank you, Vandana. Michelle,
mm, yeah.
any final comments on that?
Yeah. And well, yeah, just two of the protective factors that I just wanted to add something to the financial. Um, Good financial habits, big protective factor. Taking responsibility for yourself financially, big protective factor. Because the entrapment, the fear, the scare, when it is time to take action and remove yourself from an abusive situation, big thing, no financial discipline. The amount of preparation that we have to go through with that person just to be able to do simple financial things and see themselves taking financial responsibility for themselves is big. And the other thing is, in your social network, is important to know that who is good for what. So, for example, who can I call at midnight and they will not question? Without question, they will respond to me. Who can I ask to top up my phone and they don't have to know the whole history of how the world began? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Who can I leave my children with if children are involved? Who is good at listening without judgment? Who is good at practical support? Who can take my children to school because I don't drive and they'll do it consistently? So these are the things, like big protective factors. And if we live our lives like that, naturally we buffer against falling into situations of abuse. So those are the two protective factors I just wanted to elaborate on, and the importance that just one voice, sometimes we feel we're surrounded by negativity and nobody, we can't break out of it, but just one person, one supportive person, no matter what age you are, young, mature, one voice that supports you is enough to give you a sort of a line to hold on to and walk along as you walk away from abusive situations.
Thank you, Michelle. So, guys, we're nearing the end
Mm-hmm.
of this discussion. Any final
Yeah.
comments?
No, I will
Mm-hmm.
say that a discussion such as this is such an important one. And we hear so much about it year after year, and throughout the year, we hear in our own country so much news of domestic violence cases. And I hope that, today through the discussion that we've had, we have a more nuanced understanding, a clearer understanding of the different types of abuse. I want to make mention of the fact that this year, Trinidad and Tobago has seen a tremendous increase in the number of male suicides that have happened.
Mm-hmm.
And quite a few of them have been linked to, feeling marginalized and, experiencing abusive incidents in the home as well. And so that's a dynamic we have to pay attention to. We're accustomed
Yeah.
to hearing the stories of what women go through as victims, but there are so many instances that are happening that go under the radar. And when we talk next week about the experience of the victim, we'll talk some more about, both the male and female experience
Yeah.
of domestic violence.
Yeah.
But I hope that today's discussion has sort of allowed for greater insight into understanding how domestic violence can manifest in multiple ways, and understanding what
Mm-hmm.
are some of the risk and protective factors, and understanding the patterns of the behavior as well. And as I started by saying, when we understand more, we can do more. And everybody has a role to play. This is everybody's business. And we each have a duty to protect one another and to create a better world, for future generations. And it begins from a place of self-awareness and
Yeah.
knowledge.
Thank you, Vandana.
Yes. And I just want to end with an encouragement that, if viewer, listener, if you are in that situation, you can do it. One of the protective factors we talked about was just that introspection and self awareness. And even if you begin doing that inside of the situation already happening, growth is irreplaceable. You outgrow abuse. Yeah. So it means that start from where you are. And if you just sort of take in what we've been sharing and develop a habit of self awareness and introspection, you can find yourself elevating even within the situation and learning to keep yourself safe until you can free yourself from such a situation. So I just want to encourage you, it's never too late. You can do it.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Vandana. I'm grateful. I'm sure the audience and everyone, we're all grateful for the information shared and the wealth of knowledge you two have brought to this conversation. To the public, our viewers and listeners, I want to invite you to join us again on the 28th of November, as well as on the 4th of December, between the hours of 6 and 7 p.m., where both Michelle and Vandana will continue this conversation surrounding domestic violence. Thank you all for joining and have a pleasant evening.
Thank you. You did an excellent job, Devin. Thank you.
Thanks.
Wahida, are you coming back to say goodbye? So we look forward to seeing you all again and being able to share knowledge.
Right. Good night, everyone.
Wahida, back to you.
Thank you so very much for that intensive um, discussion on domestic violence. And we're hoping to see you back live on November 28th and December 4th. Thank you
December
so much.
4th.
Take care. Good night.
Bye, everyone.
Assalamu alaikum.
Bye.